Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you, as always, for taking the time to check this live stream out. Let me go ahead and get everything set up. So, for today's live stream, of course, we're going to be going over periodization for nutrition. And when it comes to this particular topic, I'm going to go through various different points and basically to sort of summarize exactly what this topic is about, because I know that the title can kind of seem a little confusing or can be somewhat, loaded in a way. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to use this title when I first done it, but I feel like if I changed it into a different title, I would go through so many different titles and I wouldn't be able to figure it out. So I decided to go with periodization for nutrition because that really summarizes what we're talking about. And periodization itself is basically going through different phases based on, your particular goals. And I'm going to dive deep into this and really dissect it so you guys have a better understanding. Again, I know that sometimes there's these big words that get thrown out, and I want to really clear up what the meaning of these particular words mean, because especially when we're talking about fitness and nutrition, there's so many different terms and so many just different things that you can hear, and it just kind of can go over your head. And there's things that I like, when I started learning, as becoming a trainer and sort of learning a lot of different terms, it kind of, became overwhelming to understand, some of these points. But what I want to say here is that this topic is very beneficial for a lot of people. It's not just, for one particular person. If you have any particular fitness goal, this is going to be beneficial and you are going to find value from it because it can relate to many different situations. So I did want to clear that up because I know this title, this is a title that I wasn't sure I wanted to have, but I decided to stick with it. And then, of course, I was going to mention that I will explain exactly what I'm going to be talking about. So I just want to clear that up at the beginning. I do want to mention my website shortly. I'm not going to go through a full spiel of my website, of course, but it is bponlinefitness.com. Again, you can find out a ton of information there as it relates to online coaching, free fitness blog, as well as signing up for my email newsletter. If you have questions, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. So let's go ahead and get started, guys, with today's topic, of course, which is periodization for nutrition. So these are the different points we're going to go over. And again, I am going to dissect these points and I am going to give you a better understanding on what we're talking about. So I'm going to start with, of course, what is nutritional periodization? Again, I did sort of summarize that, but I am going to go over that more. Aligning nutrition with your training phases, this means your workout phases, building a strategic calorie surplus. A lot of times with a calorie surplus, this is more geared towards somebody with muscle gain goal, so we'll sort of keep that in mind. The role of mini cuts in a maintenance phase, macronutrient cycling, pre and post workout nutrition in different phases, micronutrient considerations across phases, and how to monitor and adjust diet over time. So, again, as we get started with talking about this topic, just think of the term periodization as a phase, a specific phase in your overall workout routine. This could last for maybe, a few weeks. It could maybe last, a month. Periodization works in many different ways. And a lot of times, whenever I work with my clients, usually they'll go through a periodization or a particular phase in a specific workout. So before I talk about nutrition itself, when it comes to workouts, usually when my clients go through workout phases, they usually go through them for about 4 weeks. And depending on how they've progressed, we may move forward in a phase in order to gradually progress, or we may go back if we're sort of struggling in specific areas in our workouts in order to, prevent injuries and things of that nature. So that's the reason why we would use periodization as it relates to workouts in order to, progress towards muscle gain or at the same time prevent any sort of, risks of injuries and things of that nature. So, nutritional periodization is the strategic adjustment of your nutrition. This could be calories, macronutrients, and your timing to align with different phases of your training cycle and specific fitness goals. So, like I said, workouts go through periodization phases, and the same can be said with nutrition. As your workout phases change, it may be beneficial to make adjustments to your nutrition as needed. So, why does this matter? So, just like you don't train the same way all year round, you shouldn't eat the same way all year either. So, your body has different needs during muscle building, fat loss, recovery, or maintenance. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this could be for anybody. You can, make adjustments as needed, whatever your particular goal is. So, just know that you know, your specific phase is going to be completely different with somebody else's. And again, this is a very detailed topic and it can, be hard to understand in certain points. But again, I will go over this and really explain it. But just know overall, this is about, going through phases in your nutrition in order to align with your workouts. So, aligning nutrition with training phases. So, there's three different phases that I have detailed here, and this is the strength and hypertrophy phase, the cutting and fat loss phase, and the deload and the recovery phase. So, when we're talking about strength and hypertrophy, this is basically the goal, of course, of building muscle. Your primary goal is to build muscle. And the way that you do this is through a calorie surplus or a slight calorie surplus. So this is roughly plus 5 to 15% of your total calories that you're going to go over your maintenance calories. And I'm going to explain what maintenance means. Your macros are going to be protein, which is going to be high, usually 1 to 1.2 grams per body weight, per pound of body weight, I should say. Your carbs are high. This is going to fuel workouts and recovery. Now, I know that when we hear about carbs, we think of, bad carbs. But again, when we're talking about high carbs here, we're talking about complex carbs. We're talking about whole grains. We're talking about brown rice, quinoa, things of that nature. So it's those particular options that are going to be, your high carb. You're not just going to choose any carb, it's going to be those particular options. Your fats are going to be roughly moderate. Again, fats do play a role. And when we're talking about fats, we're talking about healthy fats. This is anything that can be like avocados, olive oil, anything that's like, it could be chia seeds, there's flax seeds, things of that nature is going to be your healthy fats. So keep that in mind. So the key focus here is to fuel heavy lifts, promote recovery, and prevent undereating. So for me, this is basically what I do. My main goal, of course, is to continue to build muscle. And of course, even though I'm working with clients, I have a particular goal that, I align my training around just like, I align their training. So this is roughly basically how I do my particular, nutrition is based on this particular model here because my goal is to gain more muscle. Now, if we're going into, a phase to where we may be wanting to focus on fat loss and we're not trying to gain muscle, this would be our cutting or fat loss phase. So the goal here is to reduce fat while preserving muscle. And that's what this phase is about. So we want to be strategic when we do this because if we're not, we're going to, basically hamper our, muscle gain. So the way that this works to reduce fat while preserving muscles is that you're going to be in a calorie deficit. So understanding the difference between a surplus and a deficit. A calorie surplus is when you're consuming more than your maintenance calories. I will discuss maintenance calories, but basically, maintenance calories is roughly what you normally eat day to day. And that there's a way that you can calculate that. I'm not going to go into detail about that here, but your maintenance calories is just your normal calorie intake that your body would be able to, get the proper energy it needs. Just understand that that's what a maintenance calories are. And so what you're going to do is you're going to consume a little bit less, and that's going to be roughly 10 to 25% less of what you would consume from those maintenance calories. That's what that percentage means. So your macros, you're still going to have high protein. The reason for the high protein is to help to maintain lean muscle mass. You're going to have moderate to low carbs. Again, because when it comes to carbs, if you are doing a lot of heavy training, weightlifting, you're going to want to have high carbs because your body needs more of that energy because you're burning those calories. Whereas when we're talking about fat loss, it's a little bit different where we don't need as much. So you're going to have a moderate to low calorie, or excuse me, carb intake, and then your fats are going to be moderate as well. So again, the key focus here is to retain strength, prevent muscle loss, and support satiety. So, or to be satiating, to be full longer. So that is going to be your fat loss phase. That's roughly how we would, understand that phase. Deloading and recovery phase. This is another thing too that periodically I do have my clients do as well, especially when it relates to our workouts. And then sometimes when we're talking about nutrition, sometimes that'll change as well. But basically, what this phase is to sort of slow down, basically, to sort of define what a deload means. And this can be done in workouts too. This is basically a phase to where you're not really focusing too much on either particular goal. You're kind of just maintaining. That's the main thing for this is to focus on, repairing, resetting, and preparing for your next phase. This gives your body a little bit of rest before you go back into, maybe your hypertrophy or strength phase or your cutting phase, or whatever you're wanting to do. But this is mainly to just sort of maintain where you're at. And so with this, your macros are going to be moderate to high. Your carbs are going to be lower than the peak phase. Your fats are going to be slightly higher for hormonal support. And again, the key focus is cellular repair, inflammation reduction, and balance in hormones. That's the main thing for this is you're going to focus on mainly maintaining your overall calorie intake. This isn't going to, hamper your results anyway if you're maintaining. So it's just a sort of pausing phase in between either your strength and hypertrophy or your fat loss, your cutting phase. So just understand that that's what this phase is. So I hope that that's understandable there. So the role of mini cuts and maintenance phases, again, the maintenance phase is like what we just sort of mentioned, and this is basically just maintaining your overall calorie intake. Mini cuts is known as a short-term aggressive fat loss phase. This lasts from 2 to 6 weeks. This is to quickly reduce fat gain during bulking and improving insulin sensitivity and nutrition partitioning. So it is to resensitize the body to calorie surpluses. Maintenance phases is known as periods of caloric intake at a maintenance level. So this is to re-establish your hormonal balance after cutting and bulking, consolidate body composition changes, and psychological and physiological recovery. So that's what the maintenance phase is going to do there. Again, this wouldn't necessarily be for everybody at any given situation. What I'm wanting to point out with a lot of these different things is that when it comes to understanding your nutrition, a lot of it is that you need to build something that works for you. So your goal, and your nutrition needs to be aligned to that particular goal. And you need to, build the consistency with that. So that's the main thing that you need to focus on. But just know that if you're struggling in any way, there's ways, and that's what I'm trying to get across here. There's ways that you can get back into your routine with various different strategic, different, sort of phases that you could do in your nutrition to sort of get back into that rhythm. So the main thing is, of course, to build the consistency in your nutrition. But then from there, if you do kind of struggle, there's different things that you can implement, like a maintenance phase or that mini cut phase. There's different things you can do if you need to make adjustments as needed and if you're kind of lagging in specific areas. Macronutrient cycling. So let me define what a macronutrient is. I have discussed this before, but I do want to clarify what a macronutrient is for anybody who's not watched. So a macronutrient, of course, is a nutrient that is basically the body needs in large amounts. It's consumed in large amounts, and that's why it is known as a macronutrient. So this is three different nutrients. These are carbs, proteins, and fats. And like I just mentioned with the previous slides, you noticed that there was macros, and each of those specific nutrients were labeled as a carb, protein, and fat, and that's what those are. So macronutrient cycling. So this is why is this used? So this is to optimize performance and recovery, minimize fat gain during bulking, preserve muscle during cutting, prevent metabolic adaptation, and support long-term sustainability. So how it works across phases. So if you're in a bulking phase, of course, you're going to have high carbs for training fuel. Again, keep in mind when we're talking about bulking, usually we're talking about muscle gain or we're talking about, overall wanting to gain. So the high carbs, again, you're wanting to focus on complex carbs. This isn't just any carbs. This is complex carbs. Again, your brown rice, your whole grains, things of that nature is what you need to consume. And the reason why you want to have high carbs is because you are training more heavily. When you're weightlifting more often, you're burning calories more, and that's the reasoning for this. You're going to have a moderate protein intake as well as controlled fats in the bulking phase. The cutting phase is a higher protein to preserve muscle. So, again, like we discussed with the fat loss phase previously, you're still going to have high protein. High protein is going to be, in this phase mostly to preserve that muscle mass. You're going to have moderate fats and again lower carbs. So keep that in mind with these two different phases. Again, when we're talking about bulking, we're talking about a calorie surplus, so we're consuming more. And then when we're talking about cutting, that is known as a calorie deficit, and we're consuming less. So, one thing that's you can really understand the difference between these two phases is that you're going to have a high carb intake when you're in a bulking while having moderate protein, but then when you're in a cutting, you're going to have higher protein versus having lower carb intake. So that's something that you can sort of take with you to sort of understand those two phases a little bit better. So that's what you're going to notice there. In the maintenance phase, of course, it's very self-explanatory. You're overall having a pretty balanced, macronutrient ratio overall. This is like what we just discussed when we're talking about the recovery and the deloading. This is where you're going to focus on that. So if you're going through a deloading phase sort of in your routine, then it can be beneficial to sort of focus on maintenance as well in your overall nutrition. So this is going to stabilize hormones and body composition and a psychological reset, of course. It's okay to have a phase to where, you sort of relax. You could do this like if you're going through maybe like let's say for example, you may have went through like kind of like a plateau or something to that effect, and you just feel like you're kind of reaching that point of burning out. That can be a point to where you could implement that maintenance phase as an example. So pre and post workout nutrition in different phases. So this is going to give you an example here of what you would do as far as your pre and post workout nutrition, depending on the particular phase. Again, the bulking is the calorie surplus. So this is when we're focusing more on muscle gain and things of that nature. So high carb for energy, moderate protein for pre. Okay, let me rephrase this here. So for pre-workout in the bulking phase, so you're going to have high carbs for energy, moderate protein, 15 to 25 grams, and then light fat, which is optional for pre-workout. So this is foods that you're going to consume before your workout, of course. Post-workout, you want to have carbs to replenish glycogen stores. You want to have protein that's roughly 25 to 40 grams for muscle growth. And this is one thing too that I mentioned. Um, and then, of course, low fat to aid in absorption. One thing I do always mention with my clients is usually what I do a lot of times is I'll always, consume some carbs, like a carb snack or something before I do my workout. And then usually post workout is when I get all my protein intake in. That's the optimal way. Like for example, usually I'll eat like a Cliff Bar before. And usually if you look at Cliff Bars, they're usually high in carb intake. So that's what I consume. Anything like that, I usually, eat before, I do my workout. And then post workout is when I'll, make my breakfast. Usually I have, my protein, like a protein shake and things of that nature. So that the reason being is that the carbs are for your energy into getting into your workout, and then the protein is to help in aiding with the muscle repair after your workout. So that's just what I wanted to get across there. So for cutting, you're going to have moderate carbs for performance, high protein to preserve muscle, and then low fat to avoid digestion delay. So your protein, again, that's pre-workout, and then your post-workout, your protein is still going to be high, so this is to protect muscle mass. And then some carbs to support recovery, and then minimal fats. So for your maintenance, again, this is a more balanced approach, a balance between protein and carbs. Optional small fat source, focus on steady energy pre-workout, and then post-workout, moderate carbs, protein, and nutrient-dense whole foods. Great time for full meals. So this is sort of giving you an overall blueprint on where your intake should be as it relates to, pre-workout and post-workout, depending on what phase you are in. So micronutrients is basically the opposite of macros, of course. These are, sort of smaller nutrients that you get. And usually when we think of micronutrients, they're usually vitamins, minerals, and things of that nature. That's how I, always classify them, is because usually you'll get micronutrients from specific vitamins and minerals. So, for example, and this is just considerations, this is not something you necessarily have to do, but this can help in different ways when you include specific macronutrients in your phases. So for bulking, if you want to maximize performance, again, this is optional stuff. So if you want to maximize performance and recovery, you could include B vitamins for energy metabolism, magnesium and zinc for recovery, and vitamin D for hormone support. Let's say for cutting, this again is optional. If you want to preserve, muscle and support mood and energy, you could include iron to prevent fatigue, calcium to maintain bone strength, and electrolytes, sodium, potassium to balance hydration. For maintenance, rebalancing and restoring long-term health is the main focus, and you could include antioxidants such as C, E, this is vitamin C and E, selenium to reduce oxidative stress, fiber for gut health, and omega-3s for inflammation control. So again, this is some considerations that you could keep in mind with your particular phases that you're going through. So just, be aware that, there's different things that you can do outside of just your macronutrients. So how to monitor and adjust nutrition over time. So this is something that you need to identify yourself. And this is something that I mentioned to all my clients, is that tracking nutrition is extremely important. And the way that you really are going to see results is if you track your nutrition. So your body goals and performance evolve. So should your nutrition. Regular check-ins help progress, prevent plateaus, and support long-term sustainability. So this is something that you have to, sort of understand yourself and really see your progress, you know, by what you're doing. There's different things you can do. So what should you monitor weekly and monthly? This could be body composition. So, whether you're taking photos, whether you're doing measurements, whether you're tracking your weight, these are all good indicators on where you're at in your progress. Your workout performance, how you feel in your workouts, whether you're getting stronger or you're feeling weaker, is also going to be a good indicator on what you may need to shift. Again, it's not necessary, like in your workouts, that if you're struggling in a specific workout, that can mean various different things. And it could not only be your nutrition, but it also could be how you're approaching your workouts. For example, if you're lifting a heavier weight and you're struggling with it, maybe you're not ready for that particular weight. So in certain cases, these things are a little bit independent, but in some cases, depending on how you consume with your nutrition, it can make a difference on your performance in your workouts as well. So what I'm trying to get across there is that workout performance can vary in different ways, not just, in the connection with your nutrition, but in how you progress overall in the gym makes a difference as well. So just sort of understand that those 2 points can be independent, but there can be also a chance where your workout performance could mean an indicator that your nutrition maybe needs to be altered, is what I'm trying to say there. So whether you're hungry or, you're full, this is going to be another thing to keep in mind, whether you need to adjust nutrition, your mood, sleep, and recovery quality, digestive health, adherence and lifestyle fit. This is basically where, you know, your workout routine is fitting, comfortably within your lifestyle. So make sure that, you're really defining your goals there and really understanding that. So I hope that these points are understandable. What I'm trying to get across in this particular side is that if you notice any specific setbacks in any of these points, for example, if your weight may be going up in a specific way, that may be something to do with maybe altering your nutrition in some way. If you're not feeling as strong in workouts, that could be something. But again, keep in mind that workout performance can be either or. Hunger, as well as how you feel, your sleep changes. If making changes in your nutrition may help in that regard. So just keep these points in mind on when you may need to adjust. Alrighty, so that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I know that I dived pretty deep in a lot of these points, and I know that it's a lot of information. But I think if you take the time and maybe watch again, and if you've taken notes, definitely keep these things in mind. I think it'll help if you put these things into consideration. And again, guys, this is all really good information you can take with you. This is not just something I put these together to give you guys good information and good value that you can use. This isn't just, to just throw it out there. It is to show that, you know, I do have the information that could help you. So if you do have any questions, of course, guys, feel free to message me. You can also definitely watch out my other live streams. I also archive those as well. So all of my live streams are on YouTube. I usually always post them the same day on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch them shortly after this stream is done. So definitely check those out. I do have other videos I'm working on recording and adding more, content to YouTube as well. But definitely check out my website again. It's bponlinefitness.com. If you're interested in online coaching, feel free to sign up there. There's a button at the top, and I do have 40% off right now for my spring sale. So definitely check that out. But I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. I hope that you found this helpful and valuable. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. I will have another live stream next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, as I did today. So I'll have the event posted soon to where you can RSVP to that and you can watch it live next Wednesday at 12. So thank you guys once again for watching, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday on the next live stream. So thank you guys once again.